Welcome to session 11, the final session of Block 1, the role of the Blue Shield and wider cultural property protection. And this is just a very short summary of the work that you've been through over the last few weeks. So just to give you an overview, if you remember what you've done, we did an equally short introduction to the course. I then talked about some key points about the Blue Shield, the brief history and overview of cultural property protection, and a couple of slides on the legal framework and context. We then handed over to the founding 4 organisations for them to do presentations. You then had me again talking about the Blue Shield approach. Michael then talked about CPP and the national uniform sector and how to engage with the national military organizations. And you then had a presentation from myself again about linking with the international and national humanitarian sector. And finally, we've got this block summary. So just a couple of things that I wanted to flag there that I hope you all take away with you. Firstly, there are the things that we all know about now, the 6 areas of activity, the 4-tier approach, although it's worth flagging that that was originally conceived and written back in 2013 as relating to military engagement with the heritage sector, but actually it works just as well in terms of effectively Blue Shield working with the 3 different sectors, the uniform sector, the humanitarian sector, and the heritage sector. So that 4-tier, it's expanded into a broader understanding of what's necessary. We've then got the 8 threats, and then the 5 issues faced by the Blue Shield, and I just want to go back to those in a moment to flag them, because they're not encapsulated in anything that we're all completely familiar with in terms of the things like the 6 areas or the 4-tier. So I'll just come back to those in a moment. But what we really do need to start getting across to the rest of the world is that we are a growing community, nearly 30 national committees now in existence. They will be, we hope, by the time of the General Assembly, with another 10 or so in some form of development. We're building cohesion of the national committees through these training sessions and through other links and other activities. And we are being increasingly recognised internationally as a key player in cultural property protection, as I think you'll see when you get a chance to look at the annual report and the wide range of conferences, exercises, and training sessions that we've been involved in, but also some of the things we've been asked to comment on, that we are beginning to be a sort of go-to aspect and an element of that. So let's not forget any of those aspects. And just to go back over those 5 issues, because these are things that people will, I am sure, question you all on in some way or other as you talk to people about the Blue Shield. So which comes first, people or things? Both, but people first always. But the argument is that protecting people is indivisibly intertwined with protecting their cultural property. And then the second one is that distinction between property versus heritage. We normally in the Blue Shield talk about cultural property protection, CPP, in line with the legal definition in the 54 Convention. But don't forget that our Article 2 of our Articles of Association broadens that out into talking about tangible and intangible and movable and immovable cultural and natural heritage. So we talk about it all because it's all indivisibly linked and intertwined with the protection of people. Third one, the cultural equivalent of the Red Cross movement. Absolutely, that's what we are striving towards. It was an aspiration back in 1954 and 5 and it's an aspiration that we want to deliver on as soon as possible. Why is cultural property protection important? Issue 4, it provides a sense of place, identity, and belonging, contributing to individual and community well-being and dignity, helping to build, and if we can all remember these 4 elements, healthy, peaceful, secure, sustainable communities. Because as you saw in session 10, those are almost the same, but slightly differently worded as the aspirations of the humanitarian sector. But then, of course, the health warning in issue 5, that cultural property can be used as an excuse for, and of course, a target in conflict, as well as a vehicle for understanding, mutual recognition, and peace building. But what we've got to do is make sure that everybody we talk to, everybody we liaise with, all of our partners, put the emphasis on the latter 3, understanding, mutual recognition, and peace building, rather than on the potential target and the political use of cultural property as an excuse for conflict. So I think those 5 issues are key, and I'm sorry to keep reiterating them, but those are things that we need to have in our back pocket, ready to answer anyone who questions what we're doing. And again, I come back to this image, which I'm sure by now you're getting tired of, but it summarizes what we're about. And it summarizes that where we may have started out as a heritage organization, we are now moving into being much more than that. We're there, the embodiment of the inside of the triangle, with those 3 points being the 3 different sectors: the cultural heritage sector, the humanitarian sector, and the uniformed sector. And those, of course, being impacted upon by politics, law, the media, and in particular, the social media. And finally, down at the bottom there, what underpins all of our work is those healthy, peaceful, stable, sustainable communities. So what I want to do now is just give you an insight into what we think at the moment will be probably the contents of block 2. I say that, and I stress that this is draft at the moment because we're waiting for 2 things. Firstly, this is going to be signed off eventually by the board at a meeting later in the year, and possibly early in 2022 as well. But most importantly, we're waiting for your feedback from block 1. We need to know, is the length of these sessions about right? Are the number of sessions about right? Are the subtitles working, the captions working? Are the translations working? We need all of that feedback, please, so that we know either just to carry on as we've done with block 1, or to change how we try and do things in block 2. And then we've got an outline of what we think we want to talk about, and we've got more space in block 3, which is at the moment not accounted for, but we want to get your feedback following from what you've learned in block 1. Do you want more on particular aspects? So, and I picked this out of the air from block 1, but it was the most recent one that I'd done. Do you want more about links with the humanitarian sector, for example? So we need all of that. I'm not saying that all of that would necessarily go into a block 2, because as I say, we've got some wriggle room in block 3 before we finalize everything. But at the moment, what we're thinking of doing is looking at CPP in a little bit more detail than Michael did in block 1, within the military context or continuum, moving from peacetime through kinetic operations, shooting at each other, to post-disaster, and stability policing. And we need to think in many ways of that whole engagement being most important as preparation in peacetime. Session 3, we want to go into a bit more detail about international law with very brief introductions to the terminology and types of law, and then brief introductions to things like the UN Security Council resolutions, the 1977 additional protocols to the Geneva Conventions, the Rome Statute, UNESCO's declarations, and other aspects of international law under which we operate. That law legal bit at the top of the circle surrounding our triangle. Then session 4, drilling in a little bit and picking up the key messages to the 54 Convention and its 2 protocols. We're not going to go through the convention or the protocols article by article, as you may remember that there is an option of a block 4 where people particularly interested in the legal issues could do a whole block on legal aspects of CPP. And that's a course that Emma already teaches. But in this session 4, it's just the key messages. And those are, in effect, from safeguarding to respect, and again, re-emphasizing the fact that it's a peaceful convention, a peacetime convention. If we don't get it right in peacetime, we haven't got a hope in hell of getting it right during conflict or immediately in or following a disaster. Session 5 will talk about the 3 levels of protection in a little bit more detail: standard protection, special protection, and enhanced protection. Session 6 will talk about refuges and safe havens, essentially in-country, out-of-country protection for collections. And then we're going to switch a little bit to talking about the move from refuges and safe havens to restitution and protection of property and the illegal and legal movement of objects. So covered in the first protocol to the Hague Convention, but also in the 1970 Convention. Next 2 sessions will focus in particular on illicit trafficking of cultural property. Firstly, the theory, how that works, and we'll look at how many of the routes for material are not straightforward. And instead of going from source country to market country in one step, many of these things take many of the objects that come out of source countries going the most convoluted of routes around the world over many years before they end up in the final market country, having acquired a supposedly legal but based on illegal provenance. And we'll talk about that process. We'll give you in session 9 some examples of that illicit trafficking. And then session 10 will move us across into disaster risk reduction in relation to natural disaster or human-made disaster, and talk about the inclusion of CPP and similar work in the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And then again, we'll just pull it together in a block summary in session 11. Our aspiration is that will be available in, we hope, the first quarter of next year, maybe towards the end of the first quarter, but we'll see, and we hope that that will be available. So at the end of block 1, thank you very much for those of you who have managed to log into all 11 of the original sessions and to sit through them all. We hope you've got questions for when we get together and have discussion periods over that. And please, 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 we really do want and need your feedback on what we did well in block 1 and what was less good, so that we can try and get better in block 2. We need to know if those Google translations are helpful or not at all helpful, and we need to understand how we can help better getting some of these messages across. So again, thank you for going through all of that, and I'll leave you with the website, my email address, and Emma will have sent out, or will send out in the next week or so, the final details for all of the evaluation for block 1. Thank you very much.